Ladies and gentlemen, there are college professors, and then there are college professors. Gary Gallagher is in the latter category. I'm Tom Rollins, and from 1990 to 2006, I founded and ran the Teaching Company, which produces that's all right, my mother confuses it with the Learning Company, which produces the great courses, non-credit courses taught by the country's best college lecturers. For us, a professor's teaching must be so good that people will not only enjoy it, they will enjoy it so much that they want to take another course. And we can predict when that will happen. Customers who rate a course a 9 or a 10 on a 10-point scale are roughly twice as likely to buy a second course as those who give it a 7 or an 8. So we became very scientific about finding excellence before courses ever reached our customers. Over the past 2 decades, the company has developed very rigorous, data-rich recruiting and screening procedures to find professors who can produce extreme customer satisfaction. Now, once a professor has passed through our gauntlet of reviews, we then begin course production. Even then, it's possible that we may have missed something, and that a professor won't make the grade once they begin the often very arduous process of recording an entire course. At that point, I begin to fall back on some less scientific methods to make sure that we've made the right choice. One of my private clues that we found an exceptional teacher was that the course producer, the person in charge of all aspects of making the course, would come from the studio every day and tell me we had a big success on our hands. Andreas Bergstaller was Gary's producer for his American Civil War course, and he did just that every day Gary was recording lectures. More than a decade later, Andy still recalls Gary as his favorite of dozens of professors. Quote, relaxed and amiable, combining a perfect mix of comprehensive coverage, riveting detail, insightful stories, and a great flair for drama and humor, all of which was wholly unscripted. Gary used a single-page outline for each course. Close quote. My other clue that we had hit it big with Gary was when, as happened very rarely, the camera crew would come and tell me that the course was great. They loved Gary's lectures. We actually had to stop recording and start over during Gary's lecture when he introduced General Winfield Scott, hero of the Mexican War and architect of the Union's successful Anaconda Plan to stop the South. But by the time of the Civil War, the aged Scott weighed in at over 300 pounds and could only be set on horseback using winches and pulleys hooked to a tree, and then would be lowered onto some poor nag underneath who had to bring him out and show him in front of the troops. The camera people, many of whom were ex-military, laughed so hard that the camera shook, and we had to start the lecture over again and tell everyone there's no humor for you to pay attention to during this. Our other highly scientific test was what I called the parking lot phenomenon. We loved our courses, and many of us listened to them going to and from work. One morning I pulled in but stayed in my car for an extra 10 minutes after I had arrived. And when I got out, a colleague who'd seen me said, all right, who was it? I said, oh, Gallagher on Shiloh. And he said, oh yeah, oh yeah. Even though you know how the story ends, in the hands of a master analyst and storyteller, he can make it as fresh as spring rain. Since we published that course, over 100,000 people, I'll repeat that number in case you didn't catch it the first time. Any of you from MOOC World, where you get 100,000 people but you don't charge anything for it? Over 100,000 people have purchased Gary's lectures and have begun or deepened their understanding of American history, the Civil War, and the leaders of the Southern Army with Gary. They've also told their friends about them, and many, sadly, have shared their copies with their friends for free. But I digress. Our customers didn't watch Professor Gallagher for course credit or a certificate or even for a grade. They did it because they had found a great teacher and scholar who is pretty close to perfect at what he does. One customer wrote to me, if Gallagher taught a course on coloring with crayons, I'd consider taking it. He's that good. I mentioned that 10-point scale that mattered so much at the company. With thousands of customers surveyed, Gary receives a 9 or 10 from over 90% of those who take his course. 96%. say that they would strongly recommend his course to a friend. Ladies and gentlemen, I lived this for 20 years. This was my world, this was my life for 20 years. There are only a handful of people in a generation who teach like this, and Gary is one of them. I began my company with an ideal in mind, that there are professors and teachers for whom the distance from average is a quantum leap, a difference in kind, not of degree. They are so good that we remember them decades later. I didn't know when I began if they'd be Tweedy or Hip, Ivy or State, but I knew they were out there. I spent decades of my life looking for them, and for me, and for thousands of my customers, Gary Gallagher is an idea come true. He's also a huge Bruce Springsteen fan. So forgive me, boss, if I borrow and bend a lyric. Gary, you're the one. They're all yours, boss.